Hello and welcome to Spencer's Library. I'm Claudia and today I am reviewing Far From the Madding Crowd by Thomas Hardy. This is a book that I finished a few weeks ago actually, but it's taken me a little bit of thinking time to get my thoughts into some sort of order because most of all this book left me a little bit confused. But after thinking about it for a little while and after talking about this book with my buddy reading partner for it, who is Jack from Spread Bookjoy, I think I know what I think about this book, and this is my attempt to share those thoughts with you. I'm not usually this confused about my own feelings about a book, but Thomas Hardy managed it here. This is the first Thomas Hardy book I've read. He's been on my radar for a very long time, obviously as a very well-known and well-regarded Victorian author, so it was finally the time to give his books a chance. Far From the Madding Crowd follows essentially four main characters, and they all revolve around the life of one Bathsheba Everdeen, who is a at first impoverished, orphaned young woman who then comes into an inheritance and becomes a lady farmer. The book, like from what I understand, most Thomas Hardy books is set in the countryside and around farming communities. So Bathsheba is the character around which this story revolves, but I hesitate to call her a protagonist because there's three other actors in this book who influence the life of Bathsheba, and they are her three suitors. So this book is essentially following along the plot of Bathsheba's various courtships and not courtships with three particular men. The first one of them that we meet is Gabriel Oak, who at the beginning of the book is a farmer, but then very quickly loses his fortune and becomes a shepherd. Gabriel Oak, as we pretty much are told from the very first page, is a good one. He is the archetypal Victorian working class hero. He's hardworking, he's very kind, he's very patient, he's a good friend, he's very virtuous, he doesn't drink, he doesn't party, everyone likes him, he makes friends easily, he is hard done by fate and chance, but he pulls himself up by his bootstraps, and through his hard work and through his resilience and through his knowledge about farming and about sheep, he makes his way up in the world. Gabriel Oak is very sweet and innocent at the beginning of the book, and he's immediately smitten by Bathsheba Everdeen, this young woman who crosses his path. And as a good, virtuous Victorian hero does, he proposes to her right away. And that's the sort of event that kicks off the entire story. And she declines him. She declines him in a very light-hearted way. She says that she has absolutely no intention of getting married, and she doesn't love him anyway, and she kind of laughs it off. And he is, as you'd expect, crestfallen, but because he's a good boy, he picks himself up and he carries on through life. So that's the first of Bathsheba's suitors. The next one I want to talk about is Sergeant Troy, and he's another archetype of Victorian literature. He's a rake. He is an upper class gentleman, but who's sort of lost his fortune by his own doing. He does everything that Gabriel Oak doesn't do. He gambles, he drinks, he sword fights, he sleeps around, he's in the military, he looks dashing in a red coat, and he tends to run away rather than face the consequences of his actions. I feel like I don't have to talk too much about him because you know exactly the kind of character I'm talking about. If you've read any 19th century literature whatsoever, you'll be familiar with his archetype. Characters like him really are the bread and butter of 19th century novels. They come in, they disrupt, and that is their main function of the story, and that's exactly what Troy does here. In a way, he's more interesting than Gabriel as a character, but he is quite predictable. You see him and you know exactly what's going on with him. However, the third one of the men who are all fighting for Bathsheba's affections in the book, in my opinion, the most interesting one, is Farmer Boldwood. He's a rich neighbour, he's a gentleman farmer who's described as very polite, stoic, quiet. He has been single his entire life. There are rumors about him being jilted by a former lover, and then since then he has sworn off women. He has absolutely no interest in them. And despite getting plenty of interest from the women of the neighborhood, he has shown absolutely no inclination to get involved with any of them or to marry at all. And when he first meets Bathsheba, he shows the same kind of indifference towards her as he shows to all of the women around him. But then, and this is what sets his character arc in motion, Bathsheba sends him a Valentine's card. As a joke, really. She jokes around with her maid, who is also her friend and confidant, and she writes a Valentine's card to him on which she says, "Marry me." And all of a sudden, after receiving that Valentine's card, he's not just interested in her, but positively obsessed. And I phrase it that way deliberately because Farmer Boldwood shows absolutely no interest in Bathsheba as a person. He is entirely obsessed by the idea of claiming her, of making her his wife, and that's what drives his actions in the book. I find Boldwood the most interesting character in this novel because I've not seen another character like him in Victorian fiction. Usually, the bad guys of 19th century literature are the rakes who very predictably then turn to abusive husbands once the women fall for their charms. But Boldwood is very dark in a very realistic way, and his interactions with Bathsheba in particular are genuinely chilling. In my head, as I was reading it, I started calling him the Victorian incel because the way that he feels entitled to her, the way he pressures and intimidates and bullies in a quiet, calm, polite way, almost a barely detectable way, is quite different from Troy's brashness, and it's absolutely terrifying because it is so realistic. And it is his character and the way that he behaves towards her that makes this a very compelling, a very realistic, and a book that reads very modern. The plot itself is told over basically a series of vignettes that cover quite an amount of time in Bathsheba's life, from her beginnings as an orphan who has absolutely no fortune whatsoever, to then becoming an independent farmer, the only lady farmer in the neighborhood, and having to fight for her right basically to run her own business in a sort of proto-girl boss type way, to then later her love affairs, and I don't want to spoiler anything here, but the way that she interacts with these three men in turn, that makes up the plot. But as well as having that main story, the main story that surrounds Bathsheba, Gabriel, Troy, and Boldwood, there's also these little scenes of comic relief that are mostly set around the other villagers. When I started buddy reading this with Jack, she said, oh, this is supposed to be one of his funnier ones, because Thomas Hardy has the reputation of being quite dreary and dark. And this being one of his more funny ones, I can sort of see why. And that's because, as well as the dark, dreary, horrible story of Bathsheba and these men, you get these weird comic relief interludes in which it's just the conversation between people getting drunk. It has a very stage-like quality to it, in that, you know, when you're in a theatre, you get the drama interspersed with these little scenes of comic relief, and it's the same kind of thing here. I enjoyed those scenes that basically had nothing to do with the rest of the plot, but I wouldn't say that the story itself is more lighthearted. It's more that the heaviness of the main plot is broken up by these comedic scenes and by these side characters that are very lovable and funny and that you enjoy reading about, even though they mostly don't have anything to do with the rest of the story. The reason why I was so confused by this book is the character of Bathsheba, and you've noticed that I've made it through most of this review without talking about the central character, and that's because I just can't get a handle on her. She feels so much less tangible than the three men in the story. Even after taking some weeks to reflect on this, as I said, I still don't quite know how to feel about her. I don't feel like I know her as a character. She is not as well fleshed out as the three men in the story are. In parts of the book, she's described as this shrewd, confident businesswoman, someone who gets her hand dirty and really tries to make it in the world on her own. As I said, the girl boss, I don't need no man type proto-feminist idea of the independent woman. And then in other parts of the book, she's not thinking at all and her decisions make no sense whatsoever. And every time something like that happens, where she makes a decision that's just clearly inserted into the story to create drama and to create a plot, that is explained away as, oh, she's just a silly woman. Of course she would do something as ridiculous as this or that. Which, in my opinion, is lazy characterization. And I'm not saying that a character has to function like a robot, that a character has to make sense and be completely consistent throughout a book, because partly what makes us human is these irrationalities and these moments where we act against our own interests and these moments where we act against our nature as well. But in this case, in this book, instead of adding to her humanity, this dichotomy does the exact opposite, in that it makes her feel less like a well-rounded character than the three men do. It really does read as if Hardy changed her personality in random bits depending on what the scene or the plot demanded. Rather than making her feel human and fallible, it just makes her opaque and difficult to get a handle on as a reader. Overall though, I did enjoy Far From the Madding Crowd. I didn't find it easy to read through, but that's because my own personal tastes don't really stretch to quite so indulgent a description of the weather and the countryside and the stars. And I know that's why people love Hardy, because of these pastoral scenes and the way that he really understands this farming landscape and is very immersive in that way, in that I feel like I know more about 19th century farming than I ever thought I would learn from a novel. Once the drama actually picks up, this book does get quite dramatic in almost a soap opera way. So it's a bit of a ride, this, because you go from 2 pages descriptions of the night sky to something suddenly happening in such a dramatic way. You know, we have all of the things. We have death and mysteries and mistaken identities and all of the things that are really quite melodramatic, interspersed with weird scenes of villagers getting drunk and endless descriptions of the countryside. It's an interesting book. I don't think I'll reread it, but I imagine, no, I'll definitely pick up another Hardy when the time comes. Probably not for a while. If I was still rating these on Goodreads, I'd probably give this a 3 out of 5. It was a fascinating read. I so understand why people love him. I really do. So if you are a fan of Hardy who's more well versed in his literature than I am after reading exactly one of his books, do let me know which of his works I should pick up next, because I'm most definitely going to give him another chance. I say that as if I disliked this book. I didn't dislike this book. I enjoyed it. So I'm curious to read more of his work, and still very ambivalent about this one. Boldwood really saved this one for me, because he is one of the most interesting characters I've ever read about in Victorian literature, and he really carried this book for me. I found him so chilling, so realistic, so unsettling a character that the scenes with him just stick in my mind so much more than pretty much any other parts of this book. There you go. That was my review of Far From the Madding Crowd. Let me know what you thought of the book. I'm sure there's plenty of people who completely disagree with me on that, in particular my opinion on Bathsheba. And if you do, feel free to voice your opinion below and remain respectful as always. Thank you for watching. Bye!